Welcome back to the third segment of our first Savvy Senior Show. In the first segment, you learned a little bit about me. In the second segment, you learned a little bit about our sweet Sarah. And in the third segment, we're going to learn about Jeanette Bock, who, like us, has started a new business for seniors in the last little while. And her business is called Fluid Senior Transitions. And Jeanette, I'd love to know how you got into this, because this is an amazing service that you provide.
Thank you, Mary. Well, it really all started about 8.5 years ago when my father went into a crisis situation, and it came as a huge surprise to all of us because he was only 78. He really hadn't been ever sick, and he was very healthy. So we noticed over a couple of weeks where he was having some cognitive issues, and so as a result, it got really bad, and he ended up in the hospital. And we were unsure about what his prognosis was. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia, which is a pretty devastating diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And I was completely unprepared. I have a sister in Ottawa and I have a sister in Washington, and of course I'm here. My parents were in Grimsby at the time. So he's in hospital for about 6 weeks, and the doctors over that period of time told us that he was not safe to go home and that the best place for him would be long-term care. I didn't know any options. I didn't know about retirement living at that time. And so we trusted the doctors and we said, okay. So then the more surprising thing that they said was that, okay, he's not safe at home, but you need to bring him home in order to get him on the crisis list in order to skip the line to get into long-term care. What? That didn't make any sense to me, and I started to really realize how little I knew about our healthcare system and what was in it for seniors. So here we are. I was very passionate about it, so I started to look online, really investigate things and understand what's out there on the private side of things. And I learned about retirement living, et cetera, and I decided that I was so passionate about helping other families because I knew there was others going through what I was going through. And so I got into retirement living. I completely left my shopping center career behind after 23 years, and I started from scratch in retirement living, and it was an amazing experience, and I loved it, and that's where I met you guys. So it's pretty good that way. And so what I do now is I'm like the surrogate daughter. I'm like the coach, the navigator.
You're the navigator, for sure. You're the navigator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I help families. They call me in a variety of ways, but I help families navigate through both the public system and the private system, whatever their situation is.
And your story and your experience is so relatable, I think, to so many families. I know I've experienced it countless of times working in retirement living, that I think it's just fantastic that you've started this. And I'd love for you to share more about what the services are that you can offer.
Okay. So it really breaks down into sort of two categories. And the first one I'll tell you about is really it's a crisis situation. It's when families, all of a sudden find themselves in a situation like I was in and don't know what the best move is, and they don't know what the best decisions are because they don't know the landscape, they don't know the terminology. So in a crisis situation, typically those adult children are calling me from hospital, or they're calling me, after their parent has been in hospital for a while and they realize, oh boy, they're no longer safe to go back to their home where they were living independently because things have changed. So now what? So now I help them through the discharge process and figuring out, can mom and dad go home with a little bit of support? What supports might need to be put into place? What changes to the living environment might need to happen? And then the second one is what I call it's a three-legged stool type of scenario. So mom and dad have been living great together in their home, and maybe one has a little bit of a cognitive decline and the other one has maybe some physical ailments, but together they prop each other up. Right. So what happens is when one goes down, as I say, and ends up in hospital, what happens to the other one, especially if one of them has dementia.
Right.
And I did have a situation where we had clients like that. The husband had all of the cognitive ability, but he had physical ailments which landed in a hospital. So now what about mom? Services had to be in place really quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
And are you finding that people are just connecting with you when there is a crisis? And what are the crisis situations? And what words of advice would you give?
Goodness me.
Loaded question.
You know, unfortunately, sometimes you don't see the crisis coming. You just don't. And, you know, there's not a lot to do. But those crisis situations are becoming more and more the norm, unfortunately. And with our healthcare system in the way that it is at the moment, it's quite precarious, and so is long-term care. Some of those options aren't as easily attainable, and so you have to layer different services or look at a combination of options. So in a crisis, it's crisis. It's like boots on the ground quickly. Solutions need to be found, and I have this amazing network of people, i.e. Mary Dilly and Sarah Fear. Mary Dilly from Downsizing Solutions can often help in a lot of quick circumstances. I also work with occupational therapists, physiotherapists, lawyers, like estate lawyers, and I also work with financial advisors. Yeah, absolutely. So all of these pieces come into play when I'm helping a senior through a crisis situation. The other part of my business is transitions. So again, this is where you and I work together, Sarah and Mary from Downsizing Solutions, and and Sarah from Low Remax. And this is where I pull in people to create a plan and a project plan, essentially, for helping that senior transition. And a lot of thought has to go into where you're helping them to transition to. Many people think it's like, oh, well, I'll ask my neighbor where their parent went. I would suggest you don't do that, because you've not looked at what your individual unique situation is with your mom or your father.
No, you always have to go to a professional, and I have so enjoyed working with you. We've helped the three of us together and apart have helped some amazing people. So, and I'm really excited about this show because, as I said, we've got some exciting guests coming up. No topic is off limit. We even have a sex therapist for seniors coming on the show. So we have a variety of things coming up. We'd love for you to come back and join us next week. We're not going to tell you who's on next week, so you better pay attention because you don't want to miss that one.